regulations, we're not able to use Zoom or other more common platforms. If you have any technology issues, please send a message to the host, Ellie, or call 604-340-8895. We won't be able to see each other due to the technical limitations, and you won't be able to switch on your cameras, and we're very sorry for this. We would have really enjoyed and appreciated the opportunity to see you as well. Can I have the next slide, please? So tonight you will hear updates from city leaders, and there'll be several opportunities for you to ask questions and comment on what you hear. We're very much looking forward to this dialogue. Much of what the presenters will talk about is based on the summary of community recommendations that we've posted at vancouver.ca/anti-racism. I want to thank everyone for who have already submitted questions ahead of tonight's event. You can also send in your questions using the Q&A function. Please send them to all panelists to ensure that we receive them. Open the Q&A panel by clicking on the three dots at the bottom right side of your screen next to the chat. We hope to receive and respond to as many questions and comments as possible during the event, but we will save all of the questions from tonight and respond to those which we do not cover as part of our summary document. So we will respond to everything. And so without further ado, I will turn the event over to our host.
Thank you, Sandra. I want to extend a warm welcome and hello to you, especially those of you who had a lot of difficulty in finding your way to this platform, to this moment, to this day. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that there's going to be some harmful things that are going in and through the chat already on the YouTube. And I had this thought, it's like when our ancestors were on and surrendered stolen lands, the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh and the Musqueam. I'm emboldened by their living example of tenacity and courage and holding fast to each other and extending with patience an ongoing invitation that we might begin to adapt some of the worldview, principles and values that have kept them in their power. And one of those most important principles we know is listening. There's something available when we can't see all of the faces of the people. We won't fatigue, for one thing maybe, but the other thing is I'm hoping that it'll help us dial in to this listening. And to take us there, I'm hearing an echo in the room, so I'm going to ask that that gets muted, please. Thank you. I want to read I want to start with something that has been a great companion for me in my life, and it's the words of Chief Dan George, elected Tsleil-Waututh elected chief in the 60s. And he went on, as many of you will know, to have a really important impact on poetry and film and was nominated for a Grammy. But more than anything, he always spoke truth to power. And some of you will be able to recall the words he spoke at the centenary of Canada's formation. And I'm particularly fond of Chief Dan George because I met him when I was a child in the IGA in North Vancouver. And he did a miraculous thing where I started this popsicle that was still covered in frost, and I put my tongue on it and it stuck. And I had this moment of horror. And then he leaned down and he breathed on me in my popsicle. And I was like freed from the frozen terror. And from that moment, he's been particularly defined throughout my life. I've carried this book with me everywhere I've traveled, actually. And I wanted to share some words with you that I hope will bring some of our intention about today, and that the work we do here today will make us worthy of the companionship of the Indigenous people of these lands, the First Nations people, of the deep wisdom teachings and the solidarity needed. When a thought forms, it needs much time to grow. Silence between spoken words has always been a sign of deliberation. In these new times of a modern world where everything has become of value, silence has become time. Time unused has become time wasted. We are told time is money. It's harder to find somebody who will listen. So I invite us to do some of this big listening right now. And in particular, I wanna raise 2 candles right now as we listen to the voices of our ancestors. One, I wanna raise this candle for Breonna Taylor and our ongoing and abiding struggle for justice, equity, and joy. And then I wanna raise this candle for Horace Hunter, otherwise known as Bounty Hunter, who was the proprietor of Pizza Jerk, Jamaican Pizza Jerk on Commercial Drive, and he died September 17th. You'll also know that he was a musician, and the place where he held court was his counter in the cafe, and that was one of the most important Black spots in the city. He would make you food, he would tell you jokes, you could talk music, you could go across to Ice Cold Cuts and get your hair cut. Black spaces matter. I want to raise these candles, and I invite you now to call your ancestors into the room. And if you're comfortable, pull them into the chat. Let's see their names, and we will hold them. I will feel them. I will see them, and we will have them with us as we journey in this next 2. So I'm using chat. Let's see. Whose name would you hear? Kevin, are you here? Can you help me, please? Thank you. So, and the reason, yeah, could you make it so that the chat can come in, please? The reason why I think it's important, because this also brings us closer to the relationship with our Asian brothers and sisters too, and billions of people all over the world who hail their ancestors when they're stepping in to do big work and when they're stepping into any day. Thank you. And it's to our benefit to remember that we don't walk alone and we don't do this work alone, right? And we're going to do them proud tonight because we can. And our invitation is to be good ancestors tonight. So I'm going to leave it at that for the moment. I just got a message from my sister in Cuba, because here's what's up in Cuba. Not easy. They're not meeting with their town hall around how to address anti-Black racism. I can tell you that right now. And that is alive and well in Cuba, along with a Cuban society that knows how to take care of each other in the most desperate of times. So it always feels to me that we have 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. So today I'm going to push us toward the 6 that lifts us and moves us all forward. So thank you for the people who's put their names in. Mahiri Habibi. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So one breath in. Let's, all our people are with us. Breath out like the ocean. We're not alone in this work. I'd like to introduce to you City Manager Sadhu Johnson.
Thank you, Vanessa. For help hall here for our guests in along our journey. Really just want to say thanks for your leadership. We've had together on and off. Or just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you for that. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. And I just want to start by acknowledging that it conducts its work, including this town hall, on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people who have lived on these lands since time immemorial. We are grateful guests on these lands and are committed to stewarding strong relationships with the local nations' development. Thank you to all of the members of the Black and African diasporic communities who have joined us this evening. We greatly appreciate you committing your time to be part of the town hall. There's lots to do, and the fact that you've committed time tonight, I just want to say thank you, and we acknowledge and appreciate that time. I recognize that the city has not always demonstrated appreciation for the great amount of time and energy that many of you have invested in trying to make Vancouver a more equitable place. And for that, I apologize. I'd also like to acknowledge the broader Vancouver community who are following this event via the live stream. The city is approaching this town hall as a learner, not as a leader, and I hope that our residents from outside the Black African diaspora communities will join us in this approach. This evening, we want to highlight some of the areas that we're working on to address anti-Black racism within our different departments across the city in response to the recommendations that we've heard from you over the years. And we hope to have an open talk through some of the areas that are important to rebuilding your trust in our institution and recommendations that we have heard. It's an opportunity for you to hold us accountable as city leaders. So please ask your questions and share your comments throughout using the chat box and the Q&A. We're going to do our utmost to respond to as many today as possible. We know that as an establishment built out of and within the dominant colonial culture, this journey may result in us feeling uncomfortable, and it may be very difficult. But we recognize and acknowledge that being racialized in this society is even more difficult and can be very painful, and that individual, structural, systemic, and intergenerational impacts. And in an effort to work toward equity, we are leaning into the uneasiness with the impetus that we are listening. We also recognize that as members of the Black and African diaspora communities, much hoping to work with you to explore and advance anti-Black racism initiatives. Today's event has run out of recognition that you need to hear from us about how we are addressing, or that we hope to address, the various sets of recommendations, analysis, the research that multiple community organizations and individuals have shared with us, not only this summer, but over recent years. And we thank you and many volunteers and community leaders for the time, emotional energy, and labor that you have invested into developing these recommendations and being part of our working groups, committees, and engagement activities over many, many years. The clarity and the value of the recommendations offered by Black communities and communities of African diaspora and supported by research is undeniable. The relative inaction and complacency of government organizations, including the city, and the lack of coordination to take up the recommendations are of other indications of the racism. I acknowledge that. Despite the significant financial challenges created by COVID-19, taking actions based on the recommendations that we have received from you remains a priority for us as the staff and very much from Council. City Council recently directed staff to prioritize work on anti-racism ahead of funding has been allocated to advance these efforts in 2020, which will certainly lead into 2021. In ACCS, and you just heard from Sandra, manager of ACC, are taking to follow shortly. As you're going to hear tonight in the presentations by my colleagues, my coworkers, we've already begun work on a number of actions, including beginning to implement the equity framework, which will guide projects going forward. We've also begun recruiting additional staff to develop and lead the city's anti-racism and cultural redress work. Earlier this summer, we appointed the city's first ever Chief Equity Officer, Aftab Irfan, who will lead the new Equity and Diversity Office in its work to coordinate, accelerate, and track progress on our equity-related initiatives, and you'll have a chance to meet her and hear from her in tonight's town hall. So I recognize that as a large organization, the city structure and the way that we work can be confusing to many people, including ourselves sometimes. We've created this diagram, which is also available on our anti-racism webpage, to explain the way that our organization is structured. The city's made up of a number of service groups that all have different areas of expertise, such as encouraging the development of more affordable housing, creating a healthier and more equitable Vancouver, addressing climate change, and maintaining critical infrastructure. As the city manager, I oversee all of these groups and liaise with council to ensure that we meet priorities and goals outlined for the year and make Vancouver a livable and vibrant city. This evening, you will hear from leaders of many of the departments that are depicted on this chart, who will tell you about the work that is being done in their areas to respond to your recommendations and requests. It's important to note that some of the recommendations fall outside of the city's jurisdiction and are instead overseen by the federal or the provincial government, like healthcare, the economy, education, housing, and others. Although we work closely with these organizations to advocate for Vancouver residents, we cannot make decisions on their behalf and have limited control over their operations. In policing, healthcare, equity, and other service areas, and while some of the requests fall outside the scope of city functions and are direct at times, or at least are, we are committed to advocating for residents to the organizations that handle these areas. The council has taken many steps in that direction. The Vancouver Police Board is the employer and the governing body of the Vancouver Police Department. Through the annual budget. But under the BC Police Act, which mandates how municipal police departments are funded, the act is actually undergoing review with the province, and that review will look at ways in which the police reforms can better impact municipalities like Vancouver. So thank you so much for joining us this evening for our town hall today. Thanks for taking time. And so I'd like to hand it back now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadhu. And I want to thank the city staff team for aggregating all of the recommendations that have come in both internally and externally over the last 5 years into the document that the senior staff team will be addressing today. And you can also find those on the town hall website as well. I want to also recognize that it took many people for us to get here, and we come from a long line of champions. And at this time, I want to introduce to you an idea about making an instant archive. That's right. I want to populate the chat with people who we want to hail, who we want to remember, who we know are in this room here. As an example, I would like to hail Wade Compton for his work in creating one of the most important texts in British Columbia, Black British Columbian literature and orature, Bluesprint. I want to hail the work of Angela McDougall and Battered Women's Services. I want to hail the efforts of Selwyn Jacobs, who's been telling stories about Black lives in Vancouver and in Canada through his role at the NFB as a producer and director for years. I would also like to hail people who were here in the 70s, like sepia players who are telling new stories about Black life. I want to hail people who are telling some of the new stories as well. People like Omari Newton, who are at work both on front of the screen telling stories that matter, being the voice of Black Panther, but also working within the industry to bring equity to the film and television industries, of which many Black folks get some work in, and he's there doing some heavy lifting for us as well. I want to thank NALDA and the National Congress for Black Women. I want to thank some of the new young guns like Black Lives Matter Vancouver and AfroVan Connect, and Betty Mullet, who's been doing the work on Black therapy and healing. And I'm inviting you now to take a moment. Who else would you hail? Who helped get you into the room? Who turned you onto this civic power that we have as residents in the city could be something both tangible, powerful, and transformational? If you could put their name in the chat right now, this would be a way we can build an instant archive. This will be saved. This will go down in the city annals. This is how we tell more than one story. So put it in there. This could be somebody that's known to others or somebody just known to you. Let's hold them in this instant archive because it will be saved. Let me see what you got, Van. Black Van, who you hailing? Kona. Yeah, so the YouTube is a problem. That's okay. Technology is sometimes problematic, but we're not. So let's just stay on track with the deep listening through the chaos, not only the tech chaos, but the chaos outside. We're going to distill into who are you hailing? Who's got you to this room? Who has helped you carve your path? Desmond Cole, nice one. Thank you. Desmond Cole's been doing some really important work with his writing out of Toronto and work on Black Lives and Police. Thank you, Alice. Come on, people. I'd like to see some participation from the other 68 people in the call. We're gonna come back to this. I want you to know that we are building an instant archive tonight. So I'm gonna ask you again and again if you're willing to contribute to the chat or if you want to put it in an email. We want to be able to hold all the good people together in a place where we do this big work. So at this time, let's get some questions to Sadhu. What did you hear? What are you wondering about? What do you want to hear more about? And Sadhu, I don't know if you're aware, but if you need to sit closer to your router or something, that might help with connectivity. Is this my question sheet? No. Uno momento.
Vanessa, I've turned off my video and just have the audio on, so I hope that improves my connection. Let me know if it's any better.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sadhu. So there was about the apology, and I suppose that could be thinking exactly on the kinds of policy, zoning choices, investments.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Sorry,
can hear.
just want to make sure audio is coming through. I'm hoping you can hear me, Vanessa.
Yep,
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So yeah, as a part of the city's cultural redress efforts, city staff, some of whom you'll be hearing from tonight, are definitely exploring the recommendations for a formal apology to be built into our anti-Black racism action plan that the team is developing. Definitely recognize that a formal apology must acknowledge the historical discrimination, slavery, and injustices suffered by the Black community, which resulted in the displacement of Black people, of their communities and businesses. So we are definitely committed to working with Black and African diasporic community members and elders to ensure that this formal apology is part of the city's ongoing action plan. And we definitely need to do this, and we need to do it right. And so we plan to engage in that work.
Right. What does that look like?
Well, I think we need to shape that together, and I think it needs to come out of tonight. One that I was involved in, we did a formal apology to the Chinese community, the immigrants that had suffered here in Vancouver, and it took probably about a year of writing it and working with the community around how it would roll out and what components that would include. And so I think we need to work together. This isn't about us here at the city doing this by ourselves. So I think we need to work together to figure that out together.
I appreciate that. And I know, Sadhu, that you're going to be taking your leave from the city. And I'm wondering if you have a timeline on that. I know you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of the Black History Month advisory groups and some of the work that's been sent to the city around these ideas and recommendations and what we're looking for. Will you be here and part of that process? Is that something you can begin before you leave?
Thanks. Yeah, definitely for starting it. I think you've indicated already that I am leaving my job starting in January. So my time here is limited, but my two deputy city managers are on today to ensure that we can continue maintain continuity from my office. So definitely, as a part of my time here, it's something that I'm committed to moving forward, but I recognize that it's not all going to get done while I'm here. And so you'll meet them, but Paul Mokri is on, who's a deputy city manager, as is Karen Levitt. And as I'm indicated, Aftab is also on, who is in our office and will be working on this.
Great, thank you. Sadhu, is there anything that you didn't cover in your points that you'd like to say in this last minute before we go on to speak with Mr. Andrew Niklicki? Something that's in your heart?
What's that?
Something that's in your heart, like something that's on your mind that you would say if just you and I were speaking?
Well, I mean, I guess a couple things. One is I did a letter to our staff about a year ago, just acknowledging anti-Black racism and that it exists in our city and in our organization. And it was before much of kind of the recent attention to this issue, at least in Vancouver. And I gotta say, I got a lot of emails from our own employees who face anti-Black racism on a daily basis in our community and in our in our organization. And so I think really acknowledging that exists is a really important first step. And so that email to our entire staff, I think, really set the tone and the signal that we are prepared to acknowledge that and are committed to working on it. Mm-hmm. So I just I want to kind of acknowledge that we as an organization have work to do in our own practices as an employer. And I mean, you're going to hear from Andrew in a minute, but I just want to really acknowledge that.
Well, thank you.
I'd like to sort of start with a couple of opening comments because a lot of time on foundational and fundamental pieces. And over the last distance that organizations require to actually move us forward. So I just wanted to kind of establish that because we still have a lot to do. We're nowhere near where we should be on some of our issues, and the effort continues. And I just want to acknowledge the organization for the good work that we've done today. And I'll talk a little bit about the 4 or 5 foundational fundamental pieces that we have been focusing on. I've been with the organization for a number of years, and it wasn't until about 6 years ago that we felt it was extremely important to centralize a recruiting function. And that was really to establish a transparent, a more fair, easier to understand, single sort of multidimensional assessment through individuals who were trained in the recruiting function. We've done a lot of training with those recruiters, for example, on unconscious bias, and we're very thoughtful in regards to when we establish panels within the organization. that they're diverse. So we now support, and it's taken a few years to sort of shift that function within the organization. We now support the entire organization in a recruiting function that really, for us, is fundamental and foundational, because it allows us to see where the gaps are, use data in a way, and we have a tremendous amount of outreach that we still have to do within the community, and those are some of the things we'll be focusing on going forward. Another piece that we've focused a lot of attention and time on is skill-based training for our frontline leaders, and to give them the tools and the support to deal with these types of issues. These are difficult issues in some cases in an organization as traditional as ours. They've been embedded, and it's taken a lot of time to have a different dialogue, and it requires a different level of intervention and a different skill set for individuals in a very thoughtful and a very respectful way to tackle these issues. We still have a lot of work to do. We've sort of relied more on a please tell us what's wrong, please file a complaint, and that's an old-fashioned way of doing this business, and we have to become far more how to say, sort of, we need to have an awareness so we can actually start to deal with these issues when they're in front of us, and not sort of say, well, I don't want to touch that because that's going to be a difficult conversation, or I may embarrass someone or annoy someone. And so we've really spent a lot of time trying to give folks the support, the tools to deal with these types of problems that can and do appear in the workplace. Another foundational piece is we centralized our investigation and complaint processes. There's many pieces of legislation in this province, and there's also a host of workplace policies that the employer has. And it was important for us to have the same people engaged in those investigations or discussions. So our processes were known, they were consistent, and they were transparent. As a result, maybe more of the stress and the strain on the organization that's come from the pandemic, we've really started to do some hard work on the mental health and wellness support for staff. And that's work that's in progress, and we've done a lot of good work. We've partnered with outside agencies in regards to having counselors and others who are trained in this field to be there and be available to those individuals who need to talk to someone and need to do so in a safe, respectful, and thoughtful environment. And sort of the last foundational, fundamental piece is really to establish the office in the city manager's office, and that being the equity office. And we've recently hired the chief equity officer, Aftab, who you'll meet later today. And really, this is an important piece for the organization. And sometimes you really need to centralize these functions, and you need to put them in the right spot in the organization, because they need to get noticed, and they need to have sort of the lens from above and the attention of those individuals who need to do some of the work, because it's all of us that have to cooperate and engage in doing this as leaders and as individuals who work for the city of Vancouver. Next slide. Some of the things that we are planning to do in 2021 and going forward is we've not done, we don't have good data. And we're going to do a survey this year, which was going to get us much more meaningful information, and not only information to identify who we are, but more importantly, the information that we need to identify where the gaps are and where we need to do the work. Unfortunately, that was delayed as a result of COVID, but it's now back on track, and we'll be doing that survey early in 2021. You'll hear and are likely familiar with the equity framework, and the equity framework is going to be a foundational piece for us, where it's really going to allow us to look back at the framework and look at our policies and our practices, and to ensure that those policies and practices are embedded and really flow off the framework in regards to making sure there's consistency and we're moving in the right direction. The other thing which is really, foundational is, and I've mentioned it already a little bit, is the work that we need to do as an organization as it relates to outreach. And as a prominent employer and an agency within the city of Vancouver, I mean, we feel we need to have individuals who work for us who are representative of the community that we serve. And we've got to do a better job, and we've got to get out there and get to understand who that community is, and create opportunities and ways and means of engaging with us and looking to us as becoming an employer of choice. And those are easy words to say, but those are very difficult things to do and take some time. The other thing that we continue to do, and we've had a lot of discussion over the last 18 months, is the development and the succession planning of our leaders, and the opportunities that individuals who start one day with us who are not in those leadership roles, how can they get those experiences and continue to grow with the organization. And times have changed a little bit in regards to what makes a good leader, and I know organizations have been very traditional, and in some cases it makes sense, and in other cases it may not, where we tend to rely on people who are very good technically. And leadership itself sometimes isn't about how technically good you are. It's how you can deal with people and how you can problem solve. And that often is a very different and unique skill set. And the last sort of thing we're really focusing on is to continue to do the work and the support for staff, and to make sure that folks are heard, and there's diversity in voice and diversity in thought and diversity in ideas. And how do we support that? How do we provide an environment that's safe? And how do we acknowledge those contributions? And there's a lot of literature out there that really says that organizations need to be innovative and organizations need to be agile, and you can't, it's hard to be either if you don't have diversity within your organization.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide. I think there's one more slide I have.
Thank you. Andrew, this is Vanessa. This sound for the rest of you panelists means that you're like really close to the end of your 7 minutes, Andrew. Look at that.
Okay. I'll speed it up.
Make it work.
Challenges and opportunities. I think where the largest opportunity lies is we have commitment, and that creates an opportunity. We've got a lot of things that we need to look at. We've got systemic barriers we need to address. We have to shift culture. We have to ensure staff are safe, and they tell us if there's a problem, and we are capable of identifying if a problem exists without them telling us. And those are fundamental pieces of the conversation that we have to have going forward. And they're not easy conversations, and they're not easy work. And it's going to take us some time to do it right, and we'll make mistakes. And we're hopeful that, we can continue down this path and just become a better employer and a great representative of the community that we service on a day-to-day basis. So I'll leave it at that to be mindful
Perfect.
of my 7 minutes.
Yeah, you are a time stretcher. String theory, here we go. Yeah, drink some water. To all the other panelists, I'm going to start getting real tight with this. But listen, we have a question from one of our participants online, and I'm wondering, please, if Narissa, you could pose your question to Andrew. Narissa Allen. She's going to find, Ellie is going to unmute you.
Hi, thank you. Again, to everyone. I just had a question from the aspect of business. I'm a business owner here in Vancouver, and I support and have an association for Black business here in BC. And with the federal government having made a recent commitment and a recent significant commitment to support Black businesses and business owners, I was wondering if you can speak to what plans are in place and the strategy that the city is going to be employing to support local Black businesses and the challenges faced by Black business owners and entrepreneurs.
I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question as it revolves around the business community. If that's your question, sorry, I want to.
It does. It revolves specifically around the business community.
Okay.
So
Can we?
You know what? I think that's a good question for Gil. And why don't we get Gil on that question when it comes to him? Andrew, I've got one question then for you. Is that all right with you, Narissa? We'll get that.
That's completely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming online. So Andrew, here's an important one, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to speak directly from your guts. Like, look at me like we're friends. Don't worry about the land of YouTube and all the people invisibilized in here. That they're not invisible because we're standing in listening solidarity. We want to know, some of the people have written, they'd like to know what efforts are being undertaken to ensure that Black staff are supported and heard regarding the institutional, departmental, and interpersonal racism and sexism.
And sort of start answering that question by saying we're working very diligently to ensure that staff have the ability to tell us if something's not right. And we want to be consistent, and we want to create a safe environment for those individuals to come forward, and appreciating that that is a scary thing to do, and appreciating that oftentimes people feel if they do that, there's going to be a repercussion for doing so. And what we're really striving to do, and we're very, very hopeful that with the new office, we create another safe environment for individuals to come forward. The other thing we need to do, and I don't want to lose sight of this, is we have to become better trained as individuals to see things and to have a dialogue in the now and the then, versus waiting for these things to fester and waiting for these things for people to bring forward, to have the courage to bring them forward. So
Andrew, you really made an important point about the individuals doing their own learning, and there's so many resources available. There's book clubs, there's movies, there's sitting in your prayer or meditation, there's conversation with living people, and then there's certainly hanging out with your cat. Yeah,
they're here. Don't trust me. I'm hoping they don't jump up.
Right? So yeah, I really appreciate that. And I know one of the things that we asked the senior staff to do in preparation for this is to make sure that they had done some reading and paid attention to some of the podcasts that could help them if they hadn't already been on their journey of unpacking white supremacy, white body supremacy. And this is something that will serve everybody clearly. And that we could come to this work, that you're not doing this work of dismantling white supremacy because it's a problem for Black people, and you're going to be empathetic for us. You're going to do it because it's your problem. And we have a question from one of our participants online. Andrew, once again, I appreciate your succinctness, and then we're going to move into getting a hello from Aftab. And Kona, if you could please ask your question.
Hello. My question, well, I have many questions. I have two in specifically, though. My name is Kona. I'm over here in what is colonially known as East Vancouver, land of the historical territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. I'm having a lot of feelings being on this call in this video. I have two questions for you, Andrew. The first one is the city committed to collecting and releasing data on HR? And by that, I do mean demographics, information on retention, promotion, and complaints that have come to the equity office. But in addition to that, any other complaints that go to the unions or outside bodies, and not just the number of complaints, but the grounds that people are complaining on and what is specifically being done. My second question for you, wow.
Can we do the one question, sis? Because
Yep.
That'll give us room for everybody. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I would answer that question in the sense of I can't speak on behalf of our unions, but I would answer that question in a way that would say likely yes, as long as it doesn't go into situations where individuals can be identified. We have to be careful around privacy. So there could be some high level data that we can actually share.
Thank you for your feedback. And again, everybody, we're going to have an opportunity to stay in this conversation. For those of you that have the fortitude, or those of you that need a rest, you can pass the baton. So Andrew, we thank you for your time. Kona and Narissa, we thank you for your questions. We're going to introduce now Aftab Irfan, who is the new Chief Equity Officer at the City of Vancouver.
Thanks very much, Vanessa. And 1 or 2 minutes to introduce myself. Irfan. I'm a long-term Vancouverite. I'm a mother. I'm a first-generation immigrant settler here. I'm originally from Iran. I come to City from the Equity and Inclusion Office at UBC, and I recognize some of you on this call from work that I've done through UBC. Today was my day 9 on the job, so I'm super new, and I have no initiatives to report on per se, but I'm really here mostly to listen. And I do want to say that I just want to say my position, the creation of my position and the small office, and elevating it to the city manager's office, to me is a recognition that the city needs to look internally at its own practices, at its own makeup. So many people have been saying, you know, you can't serve the Black community, you can't serve the diversity of our communities unless the city staff have the capacity to do this and are connected with those communities. So the idea of my role is actually to be focused internally, at least at the offset of this role. And also so that this work doesn't get done off the side of desks of many people and people who don't have enough power in a way organizationally to be moving it forward. I also want to say that as I enter this work and as I enter this organization, I have a base assumption that I'm walking into a culture of white supremacy. I don't need to be convinced of that. And it's not because the city is exceptionally bad or there are bad people there. It's actually the opposite, that the city is not at all unexceptional. It is totally like all the other long-standing institutions we have, which have been founded on the system of white supremacy, and we are continuing to deal with the legacy of that. So this does mean that there's bias, that there's discrimination against Black people present in the city, mostly in subtle ways, but definitely in accumulative ways that we have to pay attention to. It also means, and I've already got a sense of this in my first couple of weeks, that there's a culture that privileges certain ways of doing and being over other ways. So, you know, rationality over emotionality and embodiment, quantitative over qualitative, outcomes over relationships. And so if you don't perform some of these cultural norms, the city could be a difficult place to be, and we're hearing that from some of our racialized staff and Black staff in particular. So some of you would be familiar that you could be labeled as problematic or unprofessional if you're not going with the norms of the institution. So I really see my work as changing that culture, working to change that culture. Not easy, and it's not going to be quick. But that's where I see the mandate of my office. The job is to harmonize and integrate the city's equity initiatives. I don't know if folks know the city employs about 10,000 people altogether. Sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, especially around something like equity that is moving really quickly, relatively speaking. And so there's a real need for making sure that some of those connections are made. Providing expertise to central units like HR and also to the other units who are doing their internal work. And to speak to Kona's question, definitely one of my first priorities is to begin to articulate some metrics and measurables and begin to track not just representation, but actually the experiences of employees and begin to disaggregate that data. There are definitely barriers to the collection of this data. Most of them have to do with privacy, but I think there's some creative ways around that, and definitely I learned quite a bit at UBC about how do you present information in a way that is that can hold you accountable and is not intrusive or violating privacy. So I think that is quite an art, and I'm really interested in focusing on that. I do want to say that while my work is internally focused, the reason we're doing the internal work is so that we can serve the community better. And so I want to make an invitation to you, if you're on this call, to be in conversation directly with me or with my office. If you're having experiences with city structures or with city staffs that are racist, that are uncomfortable in any way, or that if you see leverage points, if you're saying if only that one thing would change, things would be so much better, I would be really interested in hearing that so that we can make change in a way that actually is serving the community. So I just say I'm under no illusion that the type of change we need to make is easy or quick, but I do see an awakening and a sincere interest and openness in my new colleagues in the city, and I'm actually seeing quite a few pockets of city staff who are taking this work and doing it in a very personal way. They're looking at their own privilege and their own power and how they use their power to move this work forward. So that's very encouraging to me. It's been in my first couple of weeks. I'm hoping that we can get the city to a point where some of you who've joined on this call would want to join us as a member of the city staff. And until then, please feel free to be in touch. And thanks very much for the opportunity to say hello.
Thank you so much, Aftab. I know many legions of people are very happy with your appointment and really impressed with the work that you've done to date. And we've got great confidence in you. And I know a lot of us will be here in your corner and available to do the lift. So thank you. I'm so glad that you said yes to this very important work. And before we go to Sandra Singh, where we're going to have an opportunity to hear more about the overview of the city's anti-racism strategy actions going forward, I want to address even what Aftab has said, and in particular, there's a gem, Wazi asked about what do we say to young people who are tired of consultations and nothing changes? I got to tell you, it's a long game and things do. And this is why staying in the conversation and marking our small victories, this stuff is real. If this was 30 years ago, we would not be sitting in City Hall having this conversation. Times change. We just have to keep the long view, pass the baton when you're weary, so you can sit down, take a rest, have some water, do your things that you need, and then get back up. This is the way the world works. It's a long game for all of it. So yeah, it's wearying, and you're gonna be with us for the long run. So get tired and then get back in, because that's the game, right? And then we die and they throw dirt in our face. So while we're here, we just keep on trucking. Let's hear from Sandra Singh and your thoughts on the overview of the city's anti-racism strategy going forward, please.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. And as my slides are coming up, I just want to say how much I appreciate you and your your encouragement and your critique, but also your encouragement. Thank you. And I also want to just also express my appreciation that AFTAB has joined the city. I think we're going to do great work with the community and with our staff with AFTAB's leadership in that role. I also, heading into the kind of the next few slides, where I'll highlight a few anti-racism activities and actions that are underway. It's not so much a strategy, it's just more to talk about some of the work that's happened, the work that's underway, and the work that's forthcoming. I also want to recognize the staff who are leading this work. We have an exceptional team in social policy and projects led by Mary Claire Zach, our managing director, and Wilma Clark, our assistant director. We have just an extraordinary team of staff, and I'd also like to really recognize our staff with racialized experience who are working on this, on our anti-racism and our equity work. Who it's labor, it's an emotional labor for them. They're carrying their own lived experience as well as the expectations of the community, and I just want to recognize and appreciate their work. Next slide, please. So just for a few examples of some of the work we've recently completed related to a range of anti-racism initiatives. We hired a city scholar just over a year ago now to develop recommendations to address anti-Black racism in Vancouver. That paper actually was one of the inputs into that analysis that we posted to the website along with the recommendations and calls for action from Black Lives Matter, from the UN, and a number of other sources. And so that's a very important piece of work for us. We piloted anti-Black racism and white privilege awareness training within ACCS departments last year, and we're looking forward to rolling that training out in the future, as well as one of our departments piloted bystander training, which we're looking forward to as well in the future. We worked with the province on the declaration of Day of Action Against Racism on May 29th. As part of the EOC, there was the creation of an equity and inclusion team to ensure that we were responding swiftly and with decisiveness on anti-Asian racism that we were seeing in COVID, as well as ensuring that we were connecting with racialized communities who were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And another piece which is ongoing, but we did initiate, was advocacy to the province for the creation of provincial representative for anti-racism support. Our thinking was that the province has champions for children and for children and youth, and this is a key area in terms of anti-racism. Having a champion for racialized communities would be a really important role and service. Next slide, please. Some of the work that we have underway is, as already mentioned, we're working on the development of an equity framework. I'm going to spend a bit more time on that shortly because I want to go in a bit more because I think it's a really pivotal piece for us. We're also working on the calls for justice arising from the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls inquiry. So sorry, that should be an I on that slide. Also to flag that we were funded by City Council in 2020 to start work on an anti-Black racism action plan with the community, as well as to work on the South Asian redress as well. This work was delayed because of COVID, and our staff had to turn our attention to the COVID response, but we're very much looking forward to picking that up. And the discussion of the apology that Sadhu had mentioned earlier, we see as this is the place for us to really have some of those discussions with the community about how that will look and how we move forward on that. Also later, you'll hear from Gil Kelly on the work with Hogan's Alley Society and the ongoing process of redress in relation to displacement. And we've got ongoing work happening in Chinatown with the Chinese Canadian community arising from the apology that Sadhu had mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. Some of the upcoming work underway. These are just a variety of pieces. This is not at all comprehensive. And if you want more information, community members can email equity@vancouver.ca, and we'd be pleased to follow up with more information on any of these or anything else you've read in the document. Council directed us to undertake a colonial audit, and so the planning for that is underway. We have reached out to public partners, Vancouver School Board, the Vancouver Public Library, Vancouver Coastal Health, the VPD, with the idea of creating a public partner community anti-racism working group where we can work together to work on the priorities identified by the community, racialized data, safe reporting supports for targets of hate crimes and racism and other community priorities, because we recognize that while we work in our bureaucratic kind of organizations in our silos, the community has a holistic experience. And so we need to really work together. And we also recognize it needs to be a long-term commitment. We're going to be accelerating the development of the city's commemorations policy and review of our commemorations approaches. And we have some key recruitments that are either underway or very imminent. A senior equity planner, a planner to work on anti-racism and cultural redress specifically. We'll be hiring an anti-Black racism planner to work on our anti-Black racism action plan that's funded by council, and a number of other key positions. So next slide, please. I'm just going to very briefly speak to the equity framework, because this work we see as the policy and practice framework that will change the way we think and the way we work at the city over time. It's not a strategy. It's a call and a tool for fundamental change in how we do things, what we do, how we look at things in the city with regard to all of our decisions and all of our and all of the work that we do, the processes we design, the funding, investment decisions we make. It is the piece of work that will have us applying that equity lens and really looking at the impacts of who benefits and who doesn't benefit from the work that we do, who has a say, who's centered in the work. So this equity framework is taking an Indigenous-centered, race-forward approach, intersectional approach to equity, because we recognize that the systemic racism, anti-Black racism, and anti-Indigenous racism are foundational and are really the first place that we need to start in any work around equity. Next slide, please. So the equity framework will be presented to council in November. So we're still fine-tuning some pieces, but basically what it'll do is provide a unified vision and commitment statements to embed equity-based anti-racism practice across all city departments. We'll be establishing shared definitions, targets, measures, and accountabilities. And it'll have a whole bunch of resources to support staff in implementing this work, from intersectionality support to other types of decision-making tools. And so I'll go to the next slide because I think I'm running out of time. I'd love to talk about this more, but I want to make sure there's time for everyone else. So what we've done today is this work is guided by an external advisory committee of community members with lived experience and expertise, as well as internal staff. It's also guided by staff, what we've heard through various affinity groups of staff who have racialized experience. And I just want to thank them for their learnings that kind of that inform the equity work that we're doing. We've supported some early work across departments, and we have a number of materials drafted. There's also some tools that we've worked on and actually deployed throughout the organization already: an equity decision-making tool, equity reference guide, and an introduction to intersectionality. And so these tools are already at work, but will be a key component of the framework. Next, I think that is it for me for now. But maybe I'll just, sorry. Okay, so the timeline for this is that we need to continue to engage with our external advisory group and connect with the council advisory committees. We are planning to present the interim framework to council in November, and we're really working hard to that date because it's been a long time coming. We're continuing consultation with partners, including Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. We're learning how to center this work in terms of having it be Indigenous-centered, and so this is. We do see the framework as a living document that will change as we learn around equity, around decolonization, and how we need to work in different ways that uplift our various communities. And so yeah, so I think I'll just stop there for now. And again, if folks have any questions, please feel free to email equity@vancouver.ca, and we'd be pleased to provide more information.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And just to reiterate to everybody listening, our process is that we'll hear a speaker, we'll have time for some questions, we'll take questions from the chat, as well as some of the questions that have come in through the Shape Your City. And at this time, I would like to invite Barakat to ask a question to Sandra, please.
Hello. So the question I have is I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing, and it looks like you have put a lot of work, and you have a lot of consultations, and the initiatives are very encouraging. My concern is, like every organization, the city has numerous priorities, and some of them mostly competing priorities. So how do you plan to make sure that the anti-Black racism fight stays in the forefront, that it's not taking a back seat? So how do you ensure that, and how do you give us comfort in that regard? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I think one thing I can say is that to me, this anti-racism work and this equity work is probably the most important work we're doing right now across the city, because it is fundamental to equitable participation in community access to benefits. So to me, it is so key to our prioritization this year. One of the ways that we make sure we're prioritizing it is by resourcing it. And so with council having approved a budget for us to start the work on the anti-Black racism action plan and then the ability to hire a planner and to dedicate staff to this. We have looked at our work plan and rejigged it so that we could really ensure that we have the capacity to focus on this work. And in terms of the equity framework, which, as I kind of discussed earlier, we really see as the piece that over time, as we implement it, is really the piece that's going to support that systemic change in the city. It is just fantastic to have AFTAB and an office in the city manager's office that is dedicated to this work and to supporting this organization in this change. I think these are all really important signals of the prioritization, and I think when we have been working with our colleagues across the city, there is a real commitment and a desire to do this work. I think we're all learning, so it's not to say we're going to do it perfectly and we're not going to make mistakes in it, but the commitment is there, and we've got resources to back us up.
Thank you for that, Sandra. I have a question from Shape Your City. This question is, recently, one-time funding was offered for COVID emergency support through social policy. Historically, infusions have been offered to placate or to nourish with intentions of harvest. What comes next? What does it look like to continue to act on the value?
Thank you for that question. I think the recent one-time funding that was offered for COVID emergency was really a one-time kind of response for NPOs that were struggling within the context of COVID, and we did retool our culture grants and our social grants to support nonprofit organizations. Part of our granting in both the social policy and in cultural services, as well as in homelessness services, is to both support kind of one-time projects that are priorities of community organizations and communities that work with them, as well as kind of ongoing operating support for organizations. We do know that COVID highlighted systemic and historical inequities and accelerated the need to ensure that funding is available for organizations and communities, in particular organizations that are supporting communities who are disproportionately impacted by COVID because of systemic barriers, systemic racism, and other kind of facets that have impacted them. So I think that as we move forward and we look at our granting, we do, for example, through the culture shift, which I'll talk about a little bit later, we do need to look at our granting processes, our granting distributions, across all of our granting to ensure that we are applying that equity lens. I think that's inherent in social policy and in cultural services. So much of that commitment was already there, but we do need to do that audit and do that check and make sure that we are supporting organizations that are addressing some of the key gaps and supporting equity-seeking communities. So I'm not sure if I exactly answered the question, but this is also an area of ongoing self-reflection as an organization.
Thank you, Sandra. I would like to turn to the people in our WebEx conversation. Could you feedback what you've heard? You've been listening, and I'm interested. I would like to see what it is that you've heard from our speakers to date, from Sadhu, from Andrew, from Sandra, and give us some indication. What's been vivid to you? What's mattered to you? What's mattered to you that you've heard so far? We could populate some of that in the chat right now. Be good to know how the work is landing. You may know that this is the first time that all of these external and internal recommendations have come together, and that the departments, this is one of the, as I understand it, the few times when they've had this shared mission to address it collectively. So while this might seem, as you're listening, oh yeah, this seems pretty sensible, every department's addressing anti-racism, this is a bit of a new step, and certainly one overdue, but we're in it. And it's a small victory. And I want to raise my hands to everybody here that's in the room with us and doing it, particularly Meta Brown, who got all of that information together. You will also see I raised the name, I'm hailing April Sumter's Freitag, who was the mentor for Odulapo Makende, the City of Vancouver Healthy City Scholar, who produced the report, which I've sent a link to in the chat. It's a UBC link because that's the one that came up when I Googled it. I know that the City of Vancouver is probably going to be doing some kind of wayfinding revamp so that citizens and residents, because not every resident is a citizen, can find their way through the morass that is a city website, because there's so much information and updates for all of the things that you're caring about that we could, when we find them more easily, we'll be able to keep pushing our balls forward. So thank you, everybody. Let's get a few more comments in there. And so what's going to happen next is we're going to take a body break for 2 minutes. And actually, before we do that, I want you to know that the track we're going to play is by Ndidi Onokulu, daughter of Patrick Onokulu, who does African Fest and was on Co-op Radio for years and years. And some of you will know Ndidi's been living in Montreal and internationally. She's got a supersonic track called Together, and it lasts 2 minutes and 38 seconds. And after I read something from Chief Dan George, we're going to play the track, and then you're going to either lean up on a wall and let it hold you. Someone's got your back. It's a wall that works. It'll help calm your vagus nerve system, because we got to be taking care of our nervous systems. Or you're going to go to the washroom, you're going to get a cup of tea, and then you're going to come back refreshed after I read you some Chief Dan George. This is a man who knows life. When the storms close in, this is for you, Ozzy. When the storms close in and the eyes cannot find the horizon, you may lose much. Stay with your love for life, for it is a very blood running through your veins. As you pass through the years, you will find much calmness in your heart. It is a gift of age and the colors of the fall. And the colors of the fall will be rich if you let it happen. Ndidi Onokulu on the deck while we take our body break, back in 2.5 minutes. We can get there faster if we all move together.
Get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. There's no lines when they're forced. We can bypass them all. There's no lines waiting there for us. We can move past together. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. There's no time to think about ourselves. We gotta let it go, you see. There's no time to think about ourselves, otherwise we'll live in misery. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all move together. Well, it's time to open our hearts. It's time to let ourselves be free. It's time to open our hearts, otherwise we'll live in misery. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all together. We can get there faster if we all move together. We can get there faster if we all together. Move together. Move together. Move together. Move together. Move together. Move together. Let's move together. 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 We can get there faster if we all move. If we all move together.
Yeah, indeed. We can get there faster if we all move together. One of the first times I had the opportunity to work with the city of Vancouver was with Ellen in the office, the protocol office, when Kona and Parker Johnson started the Black History Month launch celebration, which I think we started that like 8 years ago. And I want to really again raise my hands to Parker Johnson and Kona for doing that piece of the lift at the time, and all the good, hardworking, smart, heartful people that have been on that group, like Handel Wright, like Barbara Chirinos, like Crystal. And I'm going to stop talking so everybody else can talk, but I want you to, if you know who's been on that panel, on that advisory, put it in the chat, put it in our instant archive, and let's go with Ellen from the protocol office talking about Black History Month, how we're moving forward. And here we go, Ellen.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and to everybody for tuning in. I just want to say good evening. My name is Ellen Valancourt, and I'm part of the External Relations and Protocol team. And it's my pleasure to participate in tonight's town hall. First, I'd just like to extend the regrets of my good colleague, the Chief of Protocol, Leslie Matthews, who's unable to attend this evening due to illness, and we just wish her a speedy recovery. So one of the areas of responsibility for protocol, maybe you can go back or forward a slide, please, Ellie. One of the areas of responsibility for external relations and protocol is to organize the city's official celebrations and observances on behalf of council. And we work collaboratively with community partners, our council advisory committees, and community volunteers to plan and execute these events throughout the year. There are 16 official celebrations and observances in total. So in the fall of 2011, a motion was passed designating Black History Month as a council-approved event. And in that motion, it was acknowledged first that Black History Month is an important event that reflects different dimensions of diversity in our city. Secondly, this event represents meaningful cultural traditions that are observed and celebrated by a wide spectrum of Vancouver residents throughout the year and deserves special recognition. And three, Black History Month represents the spirit of inclusiveness, intercultural understanding, and community harmony that are an important part of our city's heritage. So since February 1st, 2011, the protocol team has worked with staff and volunteers from Vancouver's Black community to produce this annual event. And the following slides, I'll get you to move to the next slide, please, Ellie, indicate, these are from 2011 through to 2016, the first 5 years, and then we'll flip to the next slide in a moment. But basically they illustrate the themes, the proclamation recipients, different speakers that we've had throughout the series, performers and caterers. So just a little synopsis of that. To date, the City of Vancouver has held the formal ceremony in Council Chamber with the Mayor and Council, city and elected officials, and members of the public in attendance. An informal catered reception has typically followed this event in the third floor foyer. But being a very, very well received event, it has grown exponentially over the years. And the number of attendees now reach our maximum capacity of 200 people. And the informal reception has since been moved to the town hall, which is the largest space available on City Hall campus. At this point, there are so many names to mention on the committee, people who have been with us for 10 years. I've had the privilege of working with some of these community members for the last 3. And it is with thanks to the Black History Month Planning Committee members over the years who, through their passion and dedication, have provided guidance on themes and identified potential speakers to address issues such as the Great Black North, which was one of the first events held in 2013. The Hogan's Alley project. You can flip to the next slide, please, Ellie. The Hogan's Alley and launch of the Black Strathcona project. That was in 2014. Growing Up Black in Vancouver, 2018. And just this past year in February 2020, February 1st, Home, Homelessness, and Belonging. So at this time, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the recent letter sent to the Chief of Protocol, Leslie Matthews, from the Black History Month Event Planning Committee. And on behalf of the Chief of Protocol, we are grateful to acknowledge, grateful to the committee for taking the time to re-examine the role that they play and the purpose of the annual Black History Month event. From a singular community celebration to a forum that provides education and calls to action to end anti-Black racism. So this is important to the city as we look at how to bridge the work of external relations and protocol with other city departments. It will take some coordination and cross-departmental collaboration to carefully consider the request and provide a formal response. And it is our goal to respond with a way forward by no later than September 30th, 2020, this month. So just looking at 2021 in mind, it's right around the corner, and I know that normally our committee would be busy working on that. And while we have yet to provide a formal response to the letter from the Black History Month to the Black History Month community members, there's a window of opportunity for us here to collectively reimagine the city's launch of Black History Month, February 1st, 2021, and also an opportunity to create the necessary frameworks and mechanisms within the organization, and also to facilitate cross collaborations with the Black History Month Committee and the Black and African diaspora and committee advocates in support of transforming this event. In closing, external relations and protocol will continue to acknowledge Black History Month. That will involve a community planning group. And our team is very much looking forward to continuing our work with community partners, council advisory committees, and community volunteers to jointly reimagine and transform the Black History Month event going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. I'm seeing the chats and the comments, and I just want to really understand how many people have done great labor at great expense to themselves and to their own health and well-being. And I also want to take this moment to really acknowledge our wins, and some of those wins being some of our elders that walked in here, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal that our history is being acknowledged. and that our young people that year, we had 10 young activists being hailed the council chamber. And some years after, all the young Black children that would sit in these councilors' chairs. I'm not saying we don't have more work to do, but I'm really asking us right now, let's look at what's worked and let's keep on building on that. We know how to be dissatisfied. We know how to be angry. We know how to be, this isn't enough, and it's fuel that keeps us going. This stuff is real. But I also want to make sure that we're really paying attention to the wins of the people that are doing the heavy lifting. So Kona, I'm raising my hands to you for the good hard work, and I acknowledge the success that you've brought to bringing the work of many Black activists to bear in this chamber, in this place, in this city. So thank you kindly. Thank you kindly. I want to also I want to tell you that with this invitation that the advisory group put forward around how it could be an ongoing process, this is our invitation to stay in the conversation. And if it's not for you, that's okay. We can, talk to your friend who might have that energy, or take it for the time and then pass the baton, right? This is a relay race. Life is long if we're lucky. And we've got work to do. So let's keep doing the work. Keep getting up, because that's the, let me stop right there. I want to bring, actually, here's something. Speaking of time, Wade Compton, I already hailed him earlier. This brother, do you remember? I just want to remind some of you that have come more recently to the discovery of the history of Hogan's Alley. This book came out in 1999, and it was based in the history of Black Van, British Columbia, and Hogan's Alley. And the work that he started to do to revive this memory that had been pushed to the curb was significant. There was a time not too many years ago when the blue plaque on the wall at what was the Hogan's Alley Cafe was a victory. Now we're talking about a land trust, which we'll get to later on today. Now we're looking at our murals on the side of the viaduct. Now we're looking at an ongoing Black History Month where we're being able to talk not only the Hogan's Alley history, but the fulsome history of Black life in Vancouver, where we're able to acknowledge some of those earlier people. And if I can tell you about how hard times have been, I'm going to take a little moment right here, right now, and read you one of the voices from this is actually, forget that one. So I was going to read the piece where Rosa Pryor talked about the Spanish flu and how many people and the bodies were piled up, and the whole of Hogan's Alley and Strathcona was full of stinking, rotting bodies. Not the most cheery thought right now, perhaps, but the reason why I mention it is that, like, we just keep going. This is the invitation, people. And I wanted to read some of the voices when we talk about Hogan's Alley and when we think about Black History Month. And, we put Nora on the stamp, and that's great, but like, we have a fulsome story. So keep in conversation with the opportunity to embed that in our instant archive, and also show up at the council meetings, show up at the invitation that the protocol office has just put out. If it isn't for you now, that's great. Make sure you invite somebody who's got the feeling for it now, because this is how we keep on rolling, right? And here's some other amazing work that Sandra Singh has been doing with the Arts, Culture, and Community Services Department. That's what Sadhu talked about, ACCS. That stands for Arts, Culture, and Community Services. At this time, she's going to address culture shift and redress. And I want to say that this conversation around culture shift is one of the ways that I've seen particularly my brother, Jarrett Martineau, take really a lot of care in talking about how might Black musicians, music venues, Black cultural workers, Black artists be centralized in this a new way of supporting culture in the city. And so I want to raise my hands to you right now, Jarrett Martineau. Thank you so much for the work that you've done on this culture shift, and everybody on that team. Sandra, can you take it away?
Hi, yes, thanks so much, Vanessa. So I'll just wait as my slides are coming up. I would like to just refer back to one comment I saw come by in the chat stream around community engagement and the work around anti-Black racism. And yes, absolutely. We are hoping very much to engage with the community and must engage with the community through that work. We haven't kind of mapped that out yet, but we will be looking to reaching out to the community to talk about that and to develop that process in partnership. So just wanted to acknowledge that comment. What I'm going to spend the next 7 minutes on is some of the work happening in other departments across ACCS. I spent quite a bit of time already with our social policy team. We have many other departments in ACCS that do really important work, both in terms of setting policy agendas for the city, in terms of supporting community organizations, and as well as direct service to community. And so the next slides will speak to three of those departments. And first up is our Cultural Services Department. And Vanessa, thank you for the shout out for Jarrett, who's been doing really, really good work and and worked with the community on the development of the music strategy, the city's first music strategy. But I also want to recognize, the whole team. And Branislav Henselman, our managing director, is with us here tonight, who have done collectively extraordinary work, I think, with the community after very deep and broad consultation for well over a year, to develop and present to council last fall Culture Shift, the city's next 10-year culture plan, which I think is a really a milestone moment for the city's culture policy. Embedded in Culture Shift and underlying Culture Shift is a very deep commitment to reconciliation and decolonization, as well as equity, and really taking a look at how, as the city, we support arts and culture in the city, because arts and culture, well, aside from the inherent value, they make this sector makes the space to challenge dominant cultural norms. It's through arts and culture that we explore historic exclusion and long-held ideas of who's at the center of society and challenge those types of concepts. So the team have, in partnership with community and with the approval of council, will be implementing this policy that aims to address systemic racism in the sector, to transform how art and culture are integrated into every facet of our city, and to remove and dismantle the colonial erasure and overlay that we see around us. And the work that the team is doing on cultural equity, we see that as pushing past passive tolerance and token inclusion, and actively working to ensure more equitable recognition and support across the community of our city support. Can I see the next slide, please? Some of the upcoming work that, or the examples of the work that's underway already as part of Culture Shift, is the support for community-led projects, space projects, such as mentorship for Afro-Band Connects with BC Artscape, and a community needs assessment for the Cultural Centre in Hogan's Alley through the Cultural Infrastructure Grant funding program. Looking at advancing equitable and accessible funding, leadership, and organizational practices, both in COVID recovery, but in general, and investing in groups and supporting Black and African diasporic artists. Prioritizing Black artists and cultural leaders in the newly launched Cultural Learning and Sharing Program, and starting to improve representation of Black leadership in adjudication and nomination processes. So in terms of the work that this team does, there's a significant number of other initiatives underway. Equity, the development of equity focused working groups, doing an equity audit of our granting, looking at some of the benchmarking data to see how we are investing and where we're investing. So this is all work that is mapped out in Culture Shift. I guess I just also want to flag one other item. With the many discussions underway that have been underway over the last year, and one of the pieces that we're pulling forward this year is as I mentioned earlier, is a review of our commemoration practices and the city's commemoration policy. So that and to take a reconciliation and decolonization lens to that, as well as an equity lens. Next slide, please. We likewise have a pretty exceptional team of staff working in homelessness services and affordable housing programs. So if I could have the next slide. Thank you. Great. So one of the key changes in the homeless count this year was the collection of race-based data, which is really significant, and is just the beginning from our perspective in terms of collecting data to get a better sense of people in Vancouver or residents who are experiencing homelessness. We need to look at methods to better capture the other types of homelessness that are inherent in here, but not always seen through our data, such as people that are staying with friends, women, youth. But one of the pieces one of the things I want to flag is that what we learned in the homeless count this year is that Black residents are significantly overrepresented amongst racialized groups experiencing homelessness in Metro Vancouver. 6% of respondents identified as Black, as opposed to 1.2% of the general population in Metro Vancouver. That's a huge overrepresentation relative to the population. And so that is, next slide, please. That is, of course, a reflection of many systemic and structural barriers, intergenerational trauma, poverty and lack of income, lack of affordable supported homes, the existing criminal justice system, all of these pressures conflating into persistent and growing homelessness and encampments across our region, actually. And what we now know from our data, because of the homeless count this year, is that Black people are disproportionately represented in that community. So as we move forward, this type of data becomes very important because it starts to help us also look at responses. Can I have the next slide, please? Just need to flag, as we always do when we talk about housing and homelessness, that there are a number of barriers to supporting people out of homelessness and into housing. We have an extremely low vacancy rate in Vancouver within existing rental housing, and we have rising rents. We have existing zoning rules that prioritize low-density housing in much of the city, limiting the creation of new rental, social, and co-op housing. There's limited federal and provincial funding. And we want to recognize that there's discrimination and bias that can limit access to housing as well. That's a very real experience for many people with racialized experience in Vancouver. And we know that we do need new models for enhanced support in housing as well. Next slide, please. And I just want to highlight, this is not this is of course very well known to the community, but I just want to say how grateful we are for the partnership with Portland Hotel Society and Hogan's Alley Society on the temporary modular housing, Nora Hendricks Place. This was something that we're very grateful for, this partnership and the ability to provide these 52 self-contained units, and to be in a position to prioritize Indigenous and Black people experiencing homelessness, or who are at risk of homelessness with this housing. And of course, as part of the Northeast Falls Creek Plan, which Gil will talk about shortly in the long-term vision, there is a vision for increased housing in this affordable housing in this area as well. The next slide, please, is my last slide. And, yep, am I done?
Can we get, this is your last one?
This is my last slide, and I'll go through it super quickly. Just to flag that we do have our social operations, our community centers, Carnegie, Evelyn Cellar, and Gathering Place, that serve the downtown core. They're always looking at ways to connect with community and to work with community, and they just wanted to highlight tonight a few ways that they are working to uplift community members and to support Black and BC in their work and some other matters. And also just they wanted to flag some of the training that they have undertaken with their staff as well. So I'll wrap it up, Vanessa. Happy to take questions or anything else you need me to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you have hailed the people that have been working on the Black and BC Mutual Aid Society. I also want to, at this time, hail Felix Marie Badeau, who's been the manager at Nora Hendricks' place. She's a sister that's been doing mental health support work for maybe for decades. And she's been holding it down with a lot of love, a lot of smarts, a lot of guts, and a lot of grace. And I know Betty Millett also was working there as a mental health support worker, and she was able to do a lot of important work during this. She was able to raise close to $195,000 for the therapy and advocacy fund, and that's an important way that we've been looking at how to take care of not only the people that are the most vulnerable, but all of us, like, surviving this harrowing time. So I really wanted to thank you for bringing that last slide to bear. Questions? I have one from Maurice. Maurice, would you please? A lot of important work during this.
Hello.
Hi there.
Sorry, it's kind of cutting in and out, but my question was, again, who are the groups that you are consulting with to get this information? Like what criteria are you using to, again, determine which community organizations you're going to invite to any of these discussions that you're having?
Thank
The
you for the
reason being
question.
is we've been put stuff in.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
Yes, you were just about to clarify.
Well, yeah, we've been asking, I guess, our group, the Unity Center Association for Black Cultures, have been asking, I guess, the city, and haven't really gotten too many replies, or any at all, really. So.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I could follow up with you offline. If you could send me an email after this to, I'm not sure where your emails are going, but I can certainly follow up. In terms of the anti-Black racism work, we have not yet worked out that community engagement process yet. We do have to consult on how that will look and shape that out. But we are hoping for very broad community engagement with various organizations as well as individuals in Vancouver. So I don't have an exact answer for you, but we do want it to be broad. And so if you're interested in participating, we're interested in. We're very, very grateful and interested in working with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I have a question here for you as well from the. Am I looking at the right piece? 1 second, thank you. I put it over way far away. Let's pass on that. Are there any other questions that somebody from the floor has? Let me take a look at these. So to Maurice's point, let's talk about this. All these Black organizations, we're going to get into an instant archive moment. I want to invite you to write down all the Black organizations that you know doing good work. If you've got a link, well, you do. You use your computer and you get the URL and put it in the chat. They have. We have the opportunity to keep this chat, and that is a direct input resource that can be referenced, right? So put in the organizations or the people that we know can come together to do this work. And I'm sorry, but somehow I had a question for Sandra that seems to have fallen off my table. Sandra, in the last 30 seconds, is there something that you would like to say that you didn't say? If you were just sitting talking with one other person about this big cultural redress, about culture shift, about your role in the city, which is a relatively new role for you, and you've come from library, so you're a woman of culture, you're a woman who understands the role of culture in the world, right? So is there something in your heart that you would like to share right now?
Well, I guess at this point, what I would share is just how deeply I am committed to this work, and how much I feel this is the work that we need to be doing right now and focusing on. And I just want to, and again, it's not that we're going to do it perfectly all the time, but we're going to learn and we're going to pick ourselves up and dust off and keep going, as you noted, as we work on this. So I just want to thank everyone who's participating tonight and reaching out.
Can you tell who is the person, Sonia? Okay. Oh, shoot. I still got my microphone on. Thank you. Sonia, maybe you heard me saying, could you tell Sonia she can ask her question? Sonia, Ellie's going to find you in the chat there, and then we're going to invite you to ask a question, your question. And what I'm going to ask us to do too, we are booked to go till 8 o'clock. I'm going to ask if we could go to like 8:17. That's right. Let's see if we can close this town hall down at 8:17. Remembering that one of the big points we wanted to do is show you where we had come, where the city had come, where the work of citizens, residents, and Black communities had come to with our recommendations and where they're at with it. This is an ongoing process. So thank you for your time. Are you ready, Sonia? Has she been contacted?
Yeah, she's been unmuted.
Okay, you're unmuted if you would like to. I'm going to read your question if that's okay then, Sonia, if you get back to the mic. Her question is, I'm wondering if the engagement process with the advisories, such as the RECE, can be improved. Many members are linked to racialized community peoples and leaders outside of the usual consultation bubble, the people that usually participate in the meetings, which is why we want to fill the chat with all the other heroes and sheroes in our city. Sandra, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think engagement with the council and the city advisory committees is really critical, and so we'll absolutely be talking with them about how they would like to be engaged in this, and to ensure that they're involved throughout the process, so that we can hear them and they can meaningfully influence the work. And I just also want to recognize one of the chat comments from Alice around stakeholder mapping. I agree, it absolutely is a necessary piece of this, and we know a lot of community organizations through our granting from the various departments in ACCS, but clearly we don't know everyone, and that will be a really important piece of the initial work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Appreciate you. We are going to, so as I mentioned, Sandra worked at libraries, and the work of changing the world can feel like we don't have time for poetry. Maybe we don't have time for rest. Maybe we don't have time for cooking our own food. But again, we know that this is long, it's a marathon, and so we must make time for poetry. And William Carlos Williams said something to the effect, there are people who don't read poems, but they have died for lack of what is inside a poem. I want to read something to you from one of our other Vancouver poets. Her name is Cecily Nicholson. You will also know her to have been a legendary, long time, decades in the work, in the heart of the work in the downtown east side, doing amazing work out at Surrey Art Gallery and really writing fantastic poetry that's celebrated across the world. This is her piece, her collection called Wayside Chang. And as I read it to you, I want you to think about this instant archive that we're building. And Alice asked people about the mailing list. I want to read this to you and let the words come to you, because I'm going to ask you while we play some music for about 3 minutes to populate the people we need to know about right now, the people who have made our city what it is and what it is becoming, the people who might be 10 years old and working at Atlanthos Lab, or working in Atlanthos in the project that Antonia Ogundelli is doing with Ethos Lab. I want you to remember the elders like Eleanor Collins, who was the first Black woman in the world to have her own television show before Nat King Cole. That's right, he often gets a credit, but it was Vancouver's own Eleanor Collins, who is still alive in her 90s. Ladies and gentlemen, Cecily Nicholson talking about the visual artist Deanna Bowen. Some of you hopefully saw her show about Hogan's Alley at the Contemporary Art Gallery. That was in last year, and one of the slides at CBC just showed her work as well too. So this is Cecily in her afterword. Listening to the artist Deanna Bowen speak on what it is perhaps a lifetime of critical work enacting the archival memories of her family's history, the archival items of her family's history. She calls it settling a debt to old timers and to people who have thrived despite incredible hardship. Deanna Bowen did this work about her family who lived in East Vancouver, in Strathcona, and around Hogan's Alley. Her show at the CAG was called Harlem Nocturne after the club by Ernie King. Cecily continues, I'm heartened by a sense of familiarity, not in the history necessarily, or in the stories and memories of someone else's family, but in the realization that I too have come through, must have come through, as we all do somehow. Originating in and from multiple places, grounded in movements of resolute people, grounded in movements of resolute people. Who are the resolute people we want in our Vancouver archive? September 24th, 2020. Resolute people, instant archive in the chat. You can email it to us. If you're on YouTube, you can send that to equity@vancouver.ca. And to all you YouTubers out here who might be thinking nasty thoughts, man, put some love in your heart, read some more poetry. It's gonna be okay. You're gonna survive. Get it together. All right, so let's put it in here for our resolute people. Resolute people, here we go. There are lots of African associations, the Kenya Association, yeah, and really this is part of the Vancouver history. We think about Hogan's Alley and the really important history about the Albertans and we've always had a long-term relationship with our African-American brothers and sisters as a false border, as we know, but we still have a very strong African-American community here when it comes to Canada. But we also have these huge African diasporas that are coming, right? We've got people from Ghana, we've got Horn of Africa. So that's why I want to raise Betty again, Betty Moulette's fan, the whole set of folks that we're not thinking about sometimes when we think about Black band that are coming from Ethiopia, from Eritrea. Let me raise my hand to Petro Kuzma right now too, who's doing strong work as a new board member at the Hogan's Alley Society. I'm so impressed with your thinking and your generosity. Yeah, okay, that was supposed to be Kevin. I'm sorry, I wanted to play you a cumbia version of Hotline Bling. I'm gonna give you 1 more minute, Black Van, to feed the resolute people into the chat. Or if you've got other comments you wanna make, but this is a time to hold us all and bring us all in the room, all into the conversation. Yeah, let's hear it for Kumbi, Africa Great Lakes Network and Society of BC. Let's hear it for Yassini with his big set of lungs coming in there with his big, beautiful African Descent Festival. Come on, people. And if you can't think of anybody, let's think about that. You go quiet or you just get down to it. Just archive, do it now. Big rain coming down on City Hall right now. Gil Kelly, it's a good thing you're keeping this roof in place with those great engineering skills. Or excuse me, it's manager Lon Leclerc. Lon?
Yes, in fact, I just heard that. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, those gutters better be clear.
Yeah, those gutters better be clear. And every time the rain comes, you know, we just got to be glad that it's keeping the fires away and that it can wash everything we no longer want away. We're in a rainforest, tropical rainforest. Could you please talk to us about how you're helping to address structural and built spaces that can be anti-racist? Thank you so much, Lon, Director, our General Manager of Engineering.
Yeah, thank you for given me some time to chat. Boy, it's really coming down out there right now. It's again, it's a reminder because already this year I think we've had 2 1 and 2 year storms already just in the last couple of days, and climate change is of course affecting changing our work all the time. Maybe just go to the next slide there. Tonight, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the anti-Black racism activities, both internally in the department, but also externally, and kind of as it manifests out there in the city. Just to give you a sense of briefly what the department is, we manage the water system, the sewer system, the Vancouver landfill. We have a couple of works yards. I would say what's interesting about engineering department is 80% of it and 80% of what we do is out of view. And it's buried or it's happening away in some location. But about 20% of it is very much in view. And this is the streets, the places that we think about in terms of the city. Next slide. So first of all, engineering department traditionally, I would say it's a white male, straight man's world. And this has been something engineering has been struggling with for a long time. Introducing diversity in the workplace is actually something we've stepped up just recently, and I want to tell you a little bit more about that. Next slide. I also wanted to just mention too, though, that I would say as a result of that, that kind of also manifests in the work that we do. And I'm from a transportation, before I became the GM of engineering, I was the director of transportation, so I have that as a background. And Gil's going to talk about the viaducts, but I do kind of want to just use this as an opportunity to just talk about even how the bias translates into our work. And, when I joined the city in '97, even the transportation department of that it had built-in bias in the way we described projects. And so a downtown freeway or the beginning of a downtown freeway like the viaducts would have been described as a transportation improvement, just broad like that. And of course, it probably would be perceived as an improvement if you didn't live downtown and if you drove a car and you lived in the suburb. But it certainly wouldn't be considered an improvement if you lived in that immediate area or if that was the place that you walked around. So even the way we talked about non-auto modes back then, it was considered alternative transportation, like an alternative lifestyle. That the basic way you should get around is in a car. So I just want to say that because we one of our first tasks when I joined in transportation was to remove bias, to the extent we could remove bias from our language and our analysis of the work. That was actually a big task in itself. Next slide. So next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the work that just happened recently. And this amazing group of engineering staff created what is our Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan. And it was a year in progress, but it's an amazing document. It lays out a plan for how we attract diversity into engineering, how we retain them, and that's really important because I would say initially our failings with even getting women into engineering was that they would start and they wouldn't have a good experience. They'd be out on a job site where it's predominantly male, and they wouldn't feel welcome. So it's kind of the employee experience at the city, and then on the career development and opportunities that staff are presented. So that plan, we had a big launch in January, which was fantastic. The turnout was amazing. We had hundreds of people from the engineering department turn up and get very excited about this project. And then, of course, COVID-19 hit. So it's an interruption and it's a bit of a distraction, but it didn't stop it from being a priority for this year in terms of our implementation. Next slide. So the other piece, that's kind of the internal piece in terms of the staff and what we're trying to do there. But we're also really mindful of the fact that when we design and we build and we operate and we maintain the streets, that the way that we do that actually also says something. And what we're trying to be mindful of is that we always think about safety. Like safety is a good example. Like if people feel safe, or if people are safe if they're not getting injured, for example. So there's no trip hazards, everything's smooth. But if there's no one there, of course, there's no injury, and that's not successful. So we want actually people to show up. But the other piece is the emotional safety, and emotional psychological safety is like, where do I feel invited? Where do I feel welcome? Where do I feel comfortable? And this is a new way that we need to look at our public spaces. Next slide. So what that means is that we even have to think about how we measure success. And with each of the different projects that I've taken on and that we've worked our way through, we always learn something from the people we're trying to serve. Most recently we had the people with disabilities, and it was a real learning experience for me to appreciate just being, say, wheelchair accessible is not enough. It's, do you feel welcome, and how does it show up, and how do we measure it? For example, on a successful project, how many wheelchairs are turning up? And that's a way that we can kind of say, now we've actually introduced a successful place where that group feels welcome. Next slide. So in terms of the journey ahead, as I say, we're kind of looking at it internally and externally, trying to kind of address the shortcomings we have in engineering. I mentioned some of the way that we can review our projects. And I mean, most recent example would be the changes we're proposing for the Granville Bridge. We were able to get support and help from Jay Pitter in helping us look at the options that we were considering and kind of bring a new evaluation criteria to the evaluation of those options in terms of helping us select which one we do. But also the other ones I just wanted to mention, which are really big for us as well, is the climate emergency response. Again, advancing mobility equity initiatives within the climate emergency response, because there's a lot of transportation components and thus engineering components of that work. We're supporting some external projects like the All on Board Transit Pilot. So that's kind of providing free passes to individuals and families experiencing poverty. We're working on a stewardship strategy for our public spaces as well. And we kind of need to continue to figure out how to remove barriers. So with that, maybe I could just open it up to questions.
Perfect. Listen to that, Lon. That means you did it right on time. Engineering, you're a person who understands numbers. I appreciate that.
I try to end on time all the time.
Yeah. So we do have a question for you here, and we would like to your thoughts on how you're going to create a sense of safety for racialized people in these public spaces.
That's a good question. And the how is usually something that I can't answer. That's where I need the community to help me. Because I'll tell you, every time I've tried to assume I know the answer on how to do exactly that, I was wrong. in all of my past experiences, when trying to kind of reach communities that have different lived experiences from me. And so I have to say, we have to talk about it. You need to help me through that process. Oh, Vanessa, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking to myself, wondering if there were more questions in the chat that I hadn't seen. Markiel is wondering if here's something. Will there be honorariums or payment for people in these consultation positions? I know myself have had hundreds of free time because I cared about our people, but I'm like, that's impacting my livelihood sometimes when I did this work with the city of Van. So I'm wondering if there's any plan for how to pay for this expertise, knowledge, or support people being
Well,
taken
and
time off of work.
that's another good point. I know that Gil might talk to this a little bit more in terms of city plan. Sometimes that's the only way you can get some participation for sure, because people are being pulled on for their opinions on lots of things. And it's hard to find the time in the day to kind of help us with our work. And it's almost like the way that you would engage, what's that called, a focus group or something, where you kind of bring people into the room and you say, I just need to know what your reaction is going to be like to this, that, or the other thing.
And in marketing, focus groups get paid. Like if you focus a grouping for a new.
Sometimes you need to extract that information, and it's the only way to do it. It's like pull them off the street, get in the room, help us with this.
So I think one of the ways that we have this opportunity is in this sharing. Extractive is one way to think about it, but I'm hoping that the way that we talk together is a way that when we share with you what helps us feel good, that you will also find that it's good. And so it'll be a collaboration. And that collaboration needs time that is supported if you're taking time off of your livelihood, given that many of these consultations happen during working hours for people. And so unless you've got a flexible gig economy job that you can put something on hold, it is really important that these collaborations be supported with the level of expertise that's expected from other kinds of consultants in some kind of
and I'm just saying, like, some of the greatest things I've learned have been just a side conversation where someone had a moment to share with me, not specifically to a project, but often I've been able to apply that to a lot of our work. And so I'm always open to, any kind of opportunity for a conversation about some thoughts or advice on how we could do better.
So what I'm hearing you say, Lon, is that one of the ways that you've had been impacted is when you've been listening in your social life, in being in the world. And I really encourage all of our people that if your community that you talk with and the people that you have drinks with or share a meal with all have one culture, then it's time to start showing up to the places where the other people are and taking your children and explaining that this is our beautiful city. Like when I was a child, this is one of my favorite public spaces memories. We would be at Brockton Oval in Stanley Park, hundreds of Caribbean people, hundreds of Caribbean children. That's probably an exaggeration, but hundreds of people with a lot of kids and a lot of steel drums, a lot of steel pan music, and we could cook and we'd make food and we'd have music and we'd roll down that big hill. And there's all these places where, like, you like cricket, come along and see the cricket match. And then you get a chance to speak to a whole set of Caribbean people about what matters right now or to watch how it works. And so I implore all of our city staff, and I appreciate your work, is that opening up this work is soul work, and you get to do it when you're not at work, and you get the pleasure of Black life, culture, and joy, and all the other folks if you just show up in these places and feel it out. So thank you for that. We're going to go right into Gil Kelly. Thank you so much, Lon. I appreciate you. We want to talk to Gil Kelly. My proper title.
I'm here.
Yeah. Oh. Chief of Planning, is that you?
That's me.
All right, great. Here you go with your 7 minutes. Thank you, Gil.
Yeah, you bet.
And then we'll talk.
Well, Vanessa, I thought I would kind of focus on a couple of specific planning initiatives that are going on right now that I think are of interest to this group, hopefully. I know they are, actually, because I know a number of people on the call. But I wanted to focus on those, but I wanted to maybe start with a little bit of a personal philosophy about this, because I've been doing this kind of work for quite a while now. And much of that work has been, frankly, in cities before coming here 4 years ago to Vancouver, which is a place I've grown to really love living and working in. But before that, in cities on the West Coast that have honestly larger Black populations and are probably a bit further along the spectrum in terms of empowerment of Black communities, in terms of economic, social, and political achievement. And so that's been a very important part of my community development work in the past, and as you were alluding to a minute ago with Lon, both in terms of my professional life, but also my social and even personal life. So it's a long struggle. Those cities in Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, and in Portland are it's a long struggle. As you said, it's a long game, and they're still dealing with those issues, many of the same issues that are here. And I hope to just bring that experience and those learnings with me into this work. And so for me, this is a very genuine kind of conversation tonight, and a very genuine effort that we're attempting to make with the Black community here in Vancouver, and with other racialized and marginalized populations in Vancouver that make up such a wonderful and diverse city. So with that, let me just jump to the next slide here. I'm going to talk about two initiatives. One is the Northeast Falls Creek Plan and Hogan's Alley project that resides within it. And then I'm going to talk about the citywide planning effort for a long-term city vision and strategies that's known as the Vancouver Plan, which is well underway now. So that's the second one. But let me start with Northeast Falls Creek. This blue outline here is the territory. People on the call I'm sure know it very well. The little kind of panhandle there that sticks off to the right of the slide is the east part of the extension of the viaducts that Lon mentioned a minute ago, and the easternmost part of that, the furthest right, is really the traditional home of Hogan's Alley. And the plan here, and we can go to the next image, was adopted by council in 2018 as a 30-year plan, a 30-year build out. And it really represents a vision for a very urban area, but does some other things as well. It adds major park space, and it really reconnects Chinatown and eventually Hogan's Alley back to the water, and acknowledges in a very deep and symbolic way the reconnection to the long-term land stewardship of the First Nations. So in many ways, while this plan is about better waterfront connections, better buildings, civic facilities, community assets, parks, we all came as staff working with, particularly with Hogan's Alley Society and with Chinatown, to really understand this is a plan not so much about physical things, but about community healing. And really, really central to that conversation was the work we did with Hogan's Alley and now Hogan's Alley Society to really restore that home of the Hogan's Alley blocks to, and block, particularly the Eastern Bloc, really as the home of the Black Canadian community in Western Canada, which is so important. And so just wanted to let you know that that was a really important step the City Council took in adopting this as formal city policy. Next slide. So historic image that many of you will be familiar with on the call. This is probably, my guess is from the late 30s, early 40s, judging by the vehicles there. The traditional alley that was Hogan's Alley, which was a very actually lively neighborhood for the Black community here, and was composed of not only living spaces, but bars and entertainment places, cultural gathering in an informal way, and a really wonderful, vibrant place, a part of the Vancouver culture that was not recognized by the powers that be at the time, that took this block and another chunk of Chinatown out of the city's heart, really, and imposed the, what did you call it, Lon? A traffic improvement or transportation improvement, superimposed that through the viaducts. Next. But through the planning process that a number of you were involved in, that are involved in Hogan's Alley Society now and in other groups, came together to create a vision. And part of the vision for Northeast Falls Creek was really to restore Hogan's Alley. So this is the 21st century version of Hogan's Alley, if you will. A very lively place, again, with a lot of housing, including affordable housing, mixed affordability, multiple generations, and a very, very lively street scene. So that's in a nutshell, the sort of visualization of what the hope and dream is here. Next. And some of the practicalities I wanted to get to, because those have been of concern. The city council adopted this plan and said, but it has to be self-funded. And by self-funding, we really mean we're not putting, we don't have city money to throw at this in large part. So it's really being funded by development of the larger parcels there, including those in blue and orange particularly. And so to actually free up the Hogan's Alley block and the block just west of it, we need to remove the viaducts, and we can't remove the viaducts until we have an adequate road replacement. And so the outline in red here is phase 1 of that road replacement, and happy to say that's moving along. The blue parcel there called 6B is a big opening for that and contributing a number of community facilities, but also funding there. So that design work is underway now and happening, and that's really creating some momentum because we can't really free up for availability the Hogan's Alley block until this new road network is in place that will replace the viaducts. Next slide, please. Yeah, and the outline in blue here is really phase 2, and that's where the viaducts come down, and we really free up the yellow blocks for development, including of the kind I showed on the slide a couple of slides ago for Hogan's Alley. And that's largely being funded and made possible by the development of so-called 6C, which is a set of properties largely now owned by Concord Pacific, a private holding. And it also involves requiring getting land from Concord to actually build the road. We don't control all the land right now. So part of this is getting the land trades to build the new road network that's been approved in order to free up the tearing down of the viaducts and then ultimately free up those blocks. Next. So I can answer questions about that one. But on I think we might have skipped a slide, but anyway, I'm switching now to the second issue, or second initiative, which is to really advance a long-term strategic plan for the city as a whole. What kind of city do we want to be going forward? And Vanessa was mentioning younger people, and when you think about children today, or even people in their 20s and 30s today, what kind of place do we want to make this 10, 20, 30 years from now? So a big part of that effort, we're 1 year into a 3-year effort. This will be adopted by City Council in about 2 years from now. So we mean to create that vision, not as an institution, but through a massive community engagement process, including a particular effort to reach out to groups that have not always been engaged in civic issues or in planning issues. And so you'll see some points on the slide here that I won't bother to read off, but it's meant to really engage the hearts and minds and issues of everyday people all throughout Vancouver, of all communities, and with a particular focus on racialized and marginalized communities. So just wanted to sort of put that out there, and there's a whole website dedicated to this that we can move to. Next. Not seeing the slide get advanced. So just a little, I don't need to go into detail here, but a lot of work has been done, very direct engagement with a whole number of, with an equity focus on a whole number of groups. And I just wanted to kind of say that coming out of this work will be work that does involve advancing social justice, advancing climate response, advancing economic opportunity, and advancing neighborhood livability in all kinds, even as neighborhoods in Vancouver change over time. But I was really, I took to heart the question that came in earlier from Narissa Allen. I'd love to actually touch base directly with her, because a lot of the work that's coming forward is around in that economic categories to really engage small business, which we do now, and we have in the first phase of this, but but really now a more focused engagement for small businesses that are Black owned, that are not the typical sort of businesses that are usually in front of city council. So that's a big part of the effort. And she mentioned the possibility, or the recent statement at the federal level, that there may be a special focus and assistance for Black-owned businesses. And we're really keen to see how that materializes in the federal budget, and whether cities will be the conduit for those funds or how we can help. But love to respond to Nerissa in more detail and understand her perspective, because our primary engagement is through the business improvement associations that are neighborhood level, community level, and have a Black membership, but it's not a Black focused group. So love to talk with her more about that. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Nerissa, I'm hearing an invitation that perhaps we could organize a Black BIA that could address the opportunities at hand. And I know for the work, somebody's got their mic on. There was a central to Hogan's Alley site development. I like to call it Union Village because it's on Union Street, and Hogan's Alley is a slur, and I'm kind of over it. But nevertheless, it's commonly known, but I call it Union Village. That Union Village would have, that's okay, that's just personal and with some of my people when we're ready to get to the naming piece. But yeah, for reference, I mean, it took like how many years to even have Hogan's Alley on the map, and I would about change name right now, exactly. But I will say that that has been central to so many of the participants in all of the Hogan's Alley work that we have centralized there are small business opportunities for Black and racialized people particularly. And we've got one question for you, Gil. I'm hoping you can take a moment with this before we come into closing. Thank you, everybody, for your good time. I really appreciate you being here. This is a question regarding Hogan's Alley and why has there been so little progress on the memorandum of understanding for the Hogan's Alley Society, and when the land trust will be established?
Yeah, and I was trying to set the context for that and didn't sort of complete my thought there with the road improvements and development that will pay for this and will open it up, is the work we've been kind of focusing on really hard as a planning department to begin to get some actual momentum, so that eventually this is a reality and we don't have to wait 30 years to see that reality. And, you know, to our kind of misstep, we haven't as actively kept up the conversation with Hogan's Alley Society in the last year in the way that we should, because we've been working on that other side of the equation. So we recently engaged the Hogan's Alley Society again, and I think what will be a very productive set of conversations. We had the first of those a few weeks ago, and really look forward to that piece, because we're digging into what is the meaning of land trust, how does it operate, what is the governance structure, what will be the financial model, all those important things to get that teed up. And so we have a kind of a couple sets of draft MOUs that we need to kind of meld together, but we're trying to get below the level of just the agreement language and get into some of the nitty-gritty details of how that's going to work. And so
Thank you.
yeah.
Gil, here's a question that's come in. We're clear that it's easier to have a point person, a point organization like a Hogan's Alley Society, but I'm wondering, what is the invitation for other people to share their thoughts around the development or organizations? Is there a strategy on how people not in the Hogan's Alley Society, members of their, can be at the table for these conversations?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's a really important one, and one that we raised in our first, in our last session with Hogan's Alley Society representatives, which is our conversation has to lead to a broader engagement of anyone who wants to be involved and feels that sense of ownership or hope and investment, if you will, emotional or tangible investment in Hogan's Alley or Union Village in the future. Yeah, absolutely. And we will need to figure out what is that method of engaging the broader, but we mean this to be an open conversation, not necessarily just anoint one set of people to be the exclusive dialogue in that conversation. So.
Thank you for that, Gil. I appreciate that, and I've appreciated my opportunities to work with you in the past. And I want to close off this Hogan's Alley section because we often talk about it, and I wanted to bring the voices of somebody from Hogan's Alley to the table. And Sadhu, you're after this, so I'm going to be like 15 seconds, and then you're good to go. But I wanted to bring to the table the voice of Dorothy Neely. And again, this is collected in Blues Print, Black British Columbia Literature and Orature. I invite everybody to take a look at this book, but it was originally published in Opening Doors by Daphne Marlett and Carol Itter. Again, it's artists who've been taking this history to the fore and artists that have been doing this work alongside activists. In fact, those are artist activists very generally. So just very quickly, excuse me, let me take that back. Spending time. Urgency is not me. When we heard of City Council's plans for the neighborhood, Hogan's Alley, Black Strathcona, when we heard of City Council's plan for the neighborhood, we were horrified. We just screamed. They intended to put high-rises all over here, like the West End. But the people that lived here, we just took up a petition. We got thousands and thousands of names, and we stopped them. The Vancouver Resources Board met with City Council, and they met with different organizations. They met with SPATA. I think that stands for the Strathcona, ooh, bad, Vanessa. It's a Property Owners Association. Something like that. Somebody please correct me in the chat. Back to Dorothy. You see, it wasn't just SPATA that fought for this East End. It wasn't just SPATA that fought for this East End. There was the churches, and all kinds of people got involved. The whole neighborhood got involved because we were satisfied with our neighborhood. But the people from outside came in and told us we shouldn't have these houses. We should live in housing projects. We should live in high rises. But what was wrong with living here? They didn't live here. I don't know what they were so worried about. As I said, I've lived here for 33 years and I wouldn't want to live anyplace else. Dorothy Neely, that's right, resident of Hogan's Alley Society. I'm resident of Hogan's Alley, Black Vancouver. Sadhu, are you ready to close us out?
Yes, Vanessa, thank you.
All right.
I am. I'm going to try my video again. Vanessa, can you interrupt me if the connection is bad and I should turn off my video so I just get good audio?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Well, huge thank you, Vanessa, to you. Beautiful, really well done. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody, all of you, for joining in and for really active chats going on once we figured out how to get the chats in a format that everybody could see everybody else's comments. So thanks for your patience, and sorry that it took us a while to figure that out. And we went over 36 minutes over time. So, you know, it's just amazing testament here that so many people stuck in. 25 people on YouTube. Just really great attendance. So thanks for hanging there with us. As I said earlier, I do want to acknowledge that our city council have prioritized this work, and they directed us to ensure that we move forward as quickly as possible. And when we were looking at all the various cuts and adjustments and funding that we needed to do for 2020 as a result of COVID, council were very clear that they did not want to take any funding away from this work, and they allocated the funding to continue, as Sandra said. So I really want to acknowledge them for their leadership, and they're being very clear that they want to direct us to do this work. Tonight's our first try at a town hall format like this. So Vanessa, thanks for your leadership in making it a success. And we'd like to have more of these sessions, and perhaps we can include counselors in the discussion too. This was kind of a first try for us, and we wanted to get all the staff from the different departments, but I think it would be great to have our elected officials on as well. So I know we covered a lot this evening, and there was a lot to get through. We recorded every question that was submitted, and we've tracked all of them that were submitted via our website as well. So we're going to create and then share a summary document of all that we've heard. And within the summary, we're going to try to address any outstanding themes or issues that were raised, like in the chat that we didn't get to, or discuss questions that we didn't fully get to answer. There was just not enough time. So in the meantime, if you have any follow-up questions, you can email them to equity@vancouver.ca. That's our email account, equity@vancouver.ca. We are definitely, you've heard from many of the city's staff leads for key departments tonight, and we are all committed to continuing the dialogue and also taking the action that's needed to move forward the work that we've been discussing tonight, as well as continuing to develop our existing anti-Black racism, anti-racism and equity strategies. I gotta say, tonight I was appalled by some of the comments in the YouTube chat and Instagram, and I apologize for any harm or trauma that the comments on Instagram and YouTube may have caused. We turned them off once we saw that happening, but it really demonstrates just how clearly how much work we have ahead of us in addressing anti-Black racism. So I guess I just wanted to kind of name that and acknowledge it, and recognize that we really do have more work to do that. So on behalf of the staff team that you heard from tonight, we're looking forward to working in partnership with you as we try to create a more equitable and thriving for all. And I recognize that the work is way long overdue. But we are committed to doing it, committed to being on this journey. And even getting to this town hall tonight had ups and downs, and a lot of just for us trying to figure out how to do it and to do it well. So I recognize that we are on a journey. We're committed to being on that journey. But I hope that the event has been the first in a series of opportunities for us to work collaboratively and to bring about change. As you said, Vanessa, we're all committed to making the world a better place, and we're gonna venture on that journey together. So really just thanks to all of the staff who gave their evenings to participate, and to all of you who joined in on YouTube and on the WebEx here. And just Vanessa, thanks for your leadership tonight. There were times when I was wondering, is doing the town hall the right thing to do? And you really said it's the right thing to do if we do it in a certain way, and you helped to guide us through that. So I just really thank you so much for your leadership and guidance. So I think that's all from me, and just hand it back over to you, Vanessa. Thank you all so much for participating tonight.
Thank you, Sadhu. There was a cutout for just a few moments when you were acknowledging the person who said, yes, we got to go forward, but we're going to go forward and right. Were you talking about Wilma?
I was talking about you.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you. But I would also want to acknowledge, Wilma, can I just see, could you just come, let them see your face. Oh my God. This is Wilma. She's been a real trooper to work with, I have to say. And Wilma, can you tell them what your job is here, please? And building.
Hi, I'm the Assistant Director for Social Policy with the city here.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, like working with Wilma has been
being on this journey.
So thank you for hiring Wilma, and we'll get a whole in there, and someone's got their mic on. So I'm going to close us out. I'm going to invite us to hum. As I said, the healing is part of the journey. We can't do this work all in our brains. And there's a brother called Resma Menakem. If you haven't read My Grandmother's Hands yet, this is your opportunity to think about how your body can be part of the healing, because it's our bodies that are hurting. Humming. And I'm going to invite the 12 people in this room to hum with me. And if you want to just sit and let us wash over you, or if you will hum it out with us. After that, we're just going to be silencio, send the music in, or send stuff in the chat, send us emails. And remember, we're bigger than all the hate around us, right? Nobody's bigger than us. Nobody is smaller than us. We are ready to do this work. We're built for these times. And as Mr. Marley would have said, won't you come to sing these songs of freedom, redemption songs? keep humming, it's good for your nerves. Thank you, everybody. Take care of yourself. We got this, we can do it. We got all we need. Let's go, Van City.
Thank you, Vanessa.
This is Desiree Dawson singing Young, Gifted, and Black. Right, our own Desiree Dawson.
Young, gifted, and black. What a lovely, fashion sweet. Young, gifted, and black. Open your heart to what I mean. You know, boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black.
Good night, everyone. Great work. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks for that presentation.